Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of the webinar. This is to unofficially welcome you as we wait for more participants to join, and then we can start the conversation. We appreciate the time you've taken to be part of this discussion. Please, just a reminder, if you haven't already completed the pre-webinar survey for this particular webinar, we ask that you take a couple of minutes to do so. We will, in fact, we are putting the link to that webinar survey in the chat right now. So if you haven't already completed that, kindly take a couple of minutes and do so as we wait for more people to join the webinar. Thank you once again for joining. So the pre-webinar survey link has currently been posted or is being posted in the chat. Good morning, everyone, and warm welcome to you. It's the final session in our webinar series under the Amplifying Gender Responsive Adaptation through Social Media Engagement project, which is being implemented by GenSed with support from Sigra Co-Water. My name is Regina Bolibote, and on behalf of the Gender Center for Empowering Development, GenSed, I warmly welcome all of you to today's conversation on gender and climate finance. Is Ghana's climate finance gender responsive? So since August this year, we've explored different dimensions of climate adaptation, from inclusive planning and community resilience to technology for accountability and the importance of strong partnerships. Today, we want to shift the focus to one of the most decisive factors in whether adaptation efforts succeed or fail, that is financing. Climate finance determines whose priorities are funded, whose resilience is strengthened, and whose vulnerabilities are overlooked. And we do know from experience that women, youth, and persons with disabilities are often among those most affected by climate change. Yet, they are the least represented in financial planning and decision-making processes. So today we're asking three critical questions. Are the climate financing mechanisms in Ghana responsive to gender needs? Are women-led and community-led adaptation initiatives receiving meaningful support? And what would a truly gender-responsive financing framework look like in practice? These are the questions we want to answer with our session for today. And we're privileged to have a knowledgeable guest speaker with us who will help us unpack these questions. Before I introduce him, just a quick guide on the format for the session. We'll begin with a presentation from our speaker, and then I'll engage him in a moderated discussion to clarify and reinforce key messages. There will be a Q&A session, and we invite you to engage actively. Use the chat, you can share reflections, raise questions as well. As much as possible, it's a space to shape how climate financing can better serve all of us, particularly those whose voices have been historically underrepresented. So thank you once again for being here. Let's begin by meeting our speaker for the session. He is an environmentalist by training and a non-governmental organization practitioner with over 20 years experience in the natural resources, environment, and climate change sector. Currently coordinates 7 NRE setup platforms under the CASA Initiative Ghana that includes CSO's Mining Alliance, Climate Change and Environment, Coalition of NGOs in Water and Sanitation, Coalition of CSOs on Land, CSOs Fisheries Alliance, CSOs Platform on Oil and Gas, and Forestry Watch Ghana platforms. I'm delighted to introduce to you our guest speaker for today's webinar session, today's discussion, in the person of Jonathan Goka, Coordinator, CASA Ghana Initiative. Welcome, sir, to the webinar.
All right. Great to meet everyone here this morning, and thanks for the elaborate introduction and description. I can see that on the webinar, everybody is hiding behind their camera. Maybe it's because of internet connectivity issues. So I grant people. It's just sad that I'm speaking to people that I can't even see their face. It's sad, but if that is how we choose to go, then we could all be speaking blindly into the laptop. All right, so let me begin by saying that I'm checking through the names. Only a few people may have known me. I'm the coordinator for CASA Initiative Ghana, but at the same time, I'm the convener for civil society organizations on climate change in Ghana. So SDG 13, you know, we have 17 SDGs in Ghana that we are working on each of these SDGs is led by one convener and a co-convener at the national level. So I happen to be the convener for those working under the climate change sector called SDG 13. We have about 155 civil society organizations working in this space. And one of the key things we do is to share information, share knowledge with our partners, and bring our partners to speed on what is happening at the national level regarding national level climate change policy actions and all that, so that we can all be on the same page and complement the efforts of national government in addressing issues of climate change in Ghana. So back to the specific topic that has been presented to me to speak about. I tried to, put together a few slides that could guide our discussion so that we don't lose focus, because this subject matter is so scattered, and even my personal thoughts about it are so vast. And if I start giving examples, we may lose focus. So these slides are supposed to, bring us back to the subject matter that we are supposed to be talking about. I don't know whether everybody can hear me. The room is very quiet and gentle. Maxwell, can you confirm that people can hear me before I continue?
I can hear you. If you can hear him, please just gesture. Yes, so people are just...
Okay, that's fine. All right, so the subject matter that's been given us is gender, climate finance, and whether our budgeting process is gender responsive and meeting the needs of the local people. It's important we look at this subject matter critically, so that in our own small ways, we can all contribute to making sure that our national budgets are climate sensitive and gender sensitive. So as a bit of background to some of the discussions that we are supposed to have, this year, Ministry of Finance made a call for input into the preparation of the 2026 budget statements and preparation. And I was privileged, together with members from SIGRA, to put together some input to inform how the 2026 budgeting process should be done in order to be a more gender responsive budget at the end of the day. For the 2025 budget statement that was given to the nation by Ministry of Finance, again, this at the beginning of this year, we did an analysis of that budget statement that's taking every item on the budget from ministry to agency one by one to analyze them for their climate responsiveness. There is a big relationship between climate change and gender. Climate change is mostly about vulnerabilities and what we are doing as a nation by way of our adaptation practices to, response to issues of climate change. And when you do analysis on adaptation measures or activities, they are mostly issues that got to do with gender. So gender here means women, people with disability, youth, children, etc., and other vulnerable groups. So we don't normally want to disassociate issues of climate finance from gender responsiveness. So once we are putting in a lot of resources to address issues of climate change adaptation, then inadvertently we are tackling issues of gender, because we know that our vulnerable groups are the lower ebb of the ladder when it comes to people who are resilient enough to stand to some of the effects of climate change. So when we did that analysis, we realized that the climate change component of the national budget for 2025 was only 0.2%. So if I say 0.2% here, it means that when you calculate the total climate change related components regarding every activity Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Sir,
Can you
we
hear
can
me?
hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So the total budget for Ghana's budget for 2025, we did a careful analysis of it from a climate change stand to see how the activities that are being funded are climate sensitive. And really, only 0.2% of the activities that Ministry of Finance read to us were related to climate change activities. So by extension, you could realize that the percentage of this 0.2 that should be going into the adaptation will also be very low when you compare that to the national budget. Then you realize that, as I mentioned earlier, adaptation and gender are like they are twins, they go together. You are responding to issues of adaptation, then you are responding to issues of gender. So, gender, as I said, people with disability, women, children, and youth. So, that is the kind of analysis we drew. So, in conclusion, it meant that the national level budget and the climate component of the total national budget for 2025 is very low. Was very low. So it was not. So we took the opportunity to make an input into the 2026 budget statement formulation process so that we can bring to light or to bring stakeholders' attention to the fact that our climate change and gender responsiveness of our national budget are very low and something should be done about it. All right, so that is the premise on which I'm going to make a few more comments. Then I think when the questions come, we can address more of such. So we realize that the instrument or the architecture that exists for development of our national budget, it's supposed to be top from the bottom up. So we receive input from our communities, our district assemblies, before they are all put together into a national level budget for consideration. So number one, where we have issues of gender that needs to be incorporated into our budget should be starting from our sub-national level structure. So be it the communities. So in the district assembly system of when the district assemblies are supposed to be doing their medium-term development plan by which budgets are drawn, when issues of gender are not well captured at that level, then we may be missing it at the national level. So we should be very much interested in what goes into our district and municipal assemblies medium-term development planning processes, where we can start inculcating issues of gender right from there before they come to the national. At the national level, it will be difficult because we may have lost the opportunity at the sub-national level structures where the district assembly is on top of putting together some of these budgets before it comes to the national level. So in the district assembly system, the unit of planning should be coming from the community. So in every community, we have what is called a unit committee member. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Uh-huh. We have unit committee members who are in our various communities. And these unit committees members and the assemblymen are the minutest end. So if everything is working ideally, every community should be having a community development plan. So in every district assembly, every community with their unit committee, supervised by the assemblymen, should be having a community development plan. So that is the starting point. And I said, in every ideal situation, when our systems are supposed to be working correctly, this is where we should start factoring in issues of gender from our community development plan. So at the community level, what are the needs of women? What are the needs of people with disability? What are the needs of the youth in every community? If we have a system that some of these issues are captured vividly, it is this individual community development plans that goes to the district assembly level for them to be put together into what the assembly calls their medium-term development plan. Because the district planning officer cannot sit in his office alone and develop a planning or a plan for the assembly in his office, because the plan should be informed by the needs of individual communities, individual stakeholders, and what needs to be done in every community. That should be what should be, finding its way into our district assembly plans. That is, if this system should be working perfectly. Then from the district assembly, the district planning officers and the budget officers come together to look at the gamut of activities that are needed to be done and try to assign costs to each of them. So these two key district assembly officers are very important in our planning and budgeting process when we want to talk about climate finance. So once at that level, some of these gender-related activities are identified and well budgeted for, then when it comes to the national level, through the Ministry of Local Government, then it goes to the Ministry of Finance, then it will be captured when you do the general national analysis. All the individual community gender needs and gender issues would come forth at the national level. But when these systems don't work, and community development plans are relegated to the background, the district planning officers and the district budget officers only sit in their big assembly halls and invite the assemblymen to make input, and that ends it. So that has been the bane of our problem. And you know how the allocations for the district, district, the funds that goes to the district assemblies every quarter, those funds, you know how they are released. It is so untimely. Your first quarter can be released in the third quarter. Your second quarter can be released the last quarter. So there are a lot of inconsistencies. So the districts always have a lot of backlogs when it comes to some of the needs that they need to be meeting at the local level. And also the political system we find ourselves in, the district is headed by a politician and will always want to do things that will score political points. So issues of gender are normally relegated to the background. And in our context, when we are even talking about gender, we are only looking for something to give to women, and we take the box that we have dealt with gender. We've given women clubs, it's time for campaign, we give them something to, and that is the gender we are talking about. So gender has now become synonymous to women, which is sad. But there are other vulnerabilities within the group of gender that needs to be looked at. As I mentioned, people with disability, and how are they also brought on board in all these processes. For them, I don't think we even consult them. We wait till the monies come and we say, oh, allocation for people with disability is 10% or something. Then we bring them and give them sewing machines and cutlasses and all that. But the question is, how are the needs of the people with disability factored into our budgeting processes? Do we have a specific list of needs that people need in order to overcome the climate change challenges they are facing as people with disability, as women and all that? Or the district just do a blanket allocation and decide to give people refrigerators and sewing machines? So coming back to issues of gender at the national level, our ministries, department and agencies in Accra also does their own planning as to what they need as a ministry and all that. But the question is, how gender sensitive are those plans? And do we do the gender analysis? We normally do the gender analysis after all the plans have been put in place. Then we get a gender consultant and give him the document to make the document gender sensitive, and we pay that person, and that is it. So it means that there is no intentionality in the development of each of the ministries' plans to make sure that whatever they plan to do responds to issues of gender, and by that the finances or the budget that is related to delivering those activities are well catered for. Let me give one example as to what is happening now. Currently, Ghana, we ascribe to the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and our climate change Bible, we call it the NDCs, so Nationally Determined Contribution Framework. That is where every single sector of the economy, every stakeholder that matters in the issues of climate change, put together their actions for the next 5 years, and it will be submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that will be happening at this COP this year, next week or something, when they go to Brazil. And the Ministry of Environment is feverishly putting together that document. The question is, we sitting on this platform, how many of us are involved in that process as a non-state actors, people who are concerned with the youth, people who are concerned with women, who are concerned with people with disability? How are our concerns drafted into that document, that national document? Is going to be sent to Cabinet for approval next week. How many women are aware of this document? And when the budget is being drawn, how many of us will be there to say that this is adequate or this is inadequate? So I saw one of the slides also talks about the National Adaptation Planning Framework, which is also another avenue for us to make allocation for issues of gender. So number one, we need to increase our own capacity and understanding of this frameworks that exist at the national level. Be aware before we can start the advocacy, asking for more resources or more funding to be made available for issues of gender. Number two, the individual stakeholder groups that I mentioned. We have Ghana Federation of Disability. We have Ghana Youth something. They are also there. Then Ministry of Gender and Social Protection and on. How equipped are some of these stakeholder groups? How on top of issues are these groups to make sure that the opportunities that exist for us to advocate for the increase in budgetary allocations for issues of gender are done from the word go. We don't wait till budgets are finalized and submitted before we start shouting that the allocation for gender is too small. So these individuals who parade themselves as gender consultants that Ministry of Environment always uses to polish their frameworks or their budget before they go for approval. How are these gender consultants who collect money on your behalf and say that all the instruments or the frameworks that are going through are gender sensitive, gender responsive? Have they been consulting other gender groups to know the specific needs of these people? Or they just assume by the fact that they have this title of a gender consultant, they know the needs and aspirations of each of these stakeholder groups that forms gender? Or they are just there representing women? So these are some of the issues. So in short, our national prioritization or our national approach to making sure that our activities, our projects are gender sensitive and the budgets that are allocated for issues of gender are adequate, it doesn't exist. It's always an afterthought. From my experience that I've had in this piece with the Ministry of Environment, with the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance is the one on top of all the Green Climate Fund issues, and I'm part of the National Technical Advisory Committee that approves the projects that go to GCF for funding. We have a lot of GCF projects that are being run in this country at the national level. Are we aware of some of these projects? For example, the GSLEP projects, Ghana Share Landscape Emission Reduction projects in the northern part of Ghana. And we have a whole gender action plan that is part of that project. It's a 7-year project, $50 million that the Forestry Commission is the lead implementer, supported by UNDP. How concerned are we as civil society organizations to make sure that the gender action plan that has been attached to that project is fully implemented to the benefit of the local people within the jurisdiction where these projects are being implemented. That is just one example. There is AFAWI, there is other big GCF related projects ongoing. Are we aware as non-state actors, and how are we following up to make sure that the gender components of this project are well implemented to the benefit of the stakeholders that have been identified as vulnerable groups under these projects? So in short, I believe a lot of questions are on people's mind. I will not take all the time. The slides are there, limited representation, decision making, all the issues that I've put together, they are found in those slides. If it is shared with members on the call, you see the nitty-gritty. So issues of capacity awareness and all that needs to be discussed. How relevant are the information to the stakeholders, especially the women itself, when we are talking about resilience building? How are they contributing to those discussions? So, friends and colleagues, I can go on and on, but I'll allow us to rather have an interaction where specific questions can be addressed. So, Madam Moderator, I'll end my submission here. If there are questions, then we can have that one on exchange. I think that will help delve deeper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gopa, for that presentation. I like the practical nature of it. And I like how you touched on very key aspects of even this whole webinar series: involvement of marginalized groups, capacity gaps when it comes to institutions. And so I want us to take it from there. But first of all, you did mention that you conducted an analysis of the 2025 budget, and the results, of course, very discouraging: 0.2% of climate change component in the budget. So my immediate question on that is whether this is a perennial problem we have with our budget as a country, or is specific to just the 2025 budget. I mean, as a player in the sector, you've monitored over and over. So is this perennial?
Yes, this is a general problem that is recurrent, and we've not done anything to really address this. We only talk about it, but when it comes to the practicality of putting together the budget, we are missing as important stakeholders in, putting together our concerns before the budgets are finalized. I believe this is where some of these gaps are coming from. We talk about it, we go to sleep. When the Ministry of Finance makes an announcement, we show little or no interest in submitting inputs in order to shape how the budgets are done.
Very well. So if as little as 0.2% of budgetary allocations go into climate change, and I want for you to educate us, are there specific projects listed in this budget? So because I was in my research, I was learning that most of the times they are classified under climate change projects, not necessarily specific. So is it to mitigation, is it to adaptation? Can you enlighten us on that?
Okay, so for example, when you open that budget statement, it's about 210-page document. And we were able to take it one by one, sector by sector, institution by institution. So some of the visible headline projects under climate change are from the Ministry of Lands, where they talk about, you remember this word, planting for food and jobs, that is in the previous administration. The new National Lands Ministry also has a project of tree planting. I've forgotten the cliche they've given to it. It was launched at Kwabenya school recently. 1 tree, 1 child. So that is at the Ministry of Environment. Then the Ministry of Lands also has something, 1 tree, 1 something. They also launch it with the president. Then when you come to specific organizations like the Forestry Commission, they also have projects that are for afforestation. They have projects that are supposed to go to plantation development. So those are the projects that are classified under those ministries are climate-related projects. And of course, once we are talking about tree planting and whatever, it means what? It's what? Mitigation.
Okay.
Do you understand? So as for adaptation, we have not come there at all. Because adaptation has to do with capacitating the human beings that are in those spaces to be able to live the situation they find themselves in. So when women find themselves in a particularly vulnerable community, what are we doing to those women in order for them to overcome the challenges within their locality or the context within where themselves are? Those are adaptation activities that are clearly missing in our budget. So these are just a few examples of what we found in the 2025 statement that speaks to issues of climate change.
Okay, Mr. Goka, you can take a minute to just drink some water because we can hear your breathing. In the meantime, just to inform participants, you can send in your questions, reflections, comments in the chat, and then we'll read that to Mr. Goka. Alternatively, you could just gesture and then you unmute your mic and then ask a question, or let's hear your reflections. I think there is currently a question in the chat. I see a question in the chat. What from Alexander Amoa? What practical actions should be prioritized to ensure women and marginalized groups are not just beneficiaries but key actors in climate finance, governance, and accountability? That looks like a loaded question. Mr. Goka.
All right, so that is a good question, and we have been doing bits and pieces of those interventions. So, for example, next week I'm going to Kumasi, and people with disabilities, our blind people, our physically immobile people, people in wheelchairs and all that. This is a very good group of people that have been relegated to the background for long when it comes to issues of climate change. And number one, their capacities to even understand the processes that we are going through are low. We don't want to be seen to be, advocating for people who themselves are alive and can speak for themselves. It makes a different impact. So capacity building is one, awareness raising is one. There are a lot of climate change processes, policy formulation processes, program formulation processes that are going on concurrently at the same time, even within all the ministries. As I mentioned, as we speak, the Ministry of Environment and EPA, who are the national climate change focal persons, at Koforidua now, putting together final touches to document that will be sent to Brazil next week for the world to know what practical actions Ghana is taking to address issues of climate change. But the question is, me and you, we are here talking on Zoom. Who is there representing our interests when it comes to issues of gender? Who is there speaking for the people of disability? Who is there to speak for somebody who is blind, who cannot even see the dangers that are coming as a result of climate change? Are the people there just doing guesswork on behalf of these people? So it means that once you are not even the issues of allocation of budget and all that, you can't even take part in those. So number one, the practical steps are we should all take interest, build our own capacity, understand the policy development processes. Then we network with the right institutions who are in charge of putting all this together. When request for project goes to the Ministry of Finance for projects to be funded in Ghana, how do we make sure that people with gender background are part of the selection process to make sure that projects are gender sensitive and enough allocation of budget is put together for issues of gender before Ministry of Finance signs off such projects? So the avenues are there. just that we lack the capacity and the understanding, or maybe even knowledge, awareness, reason on where these things are going on, in order for us to be in those spaces to, speak for ourselves as non-state actors. So we need to take interest, just as Sigra and Jen said is doing, information sharing. Those who have the information as to what is happening in those spaces, how do we get a larger group of people to share this information with, so that strategically they can also, follow up and get connected to such spaces. So these are if you say practical steps, it starts from number one, you need to be aware. Number two, you need to have the right partnerships. Number three, you need to be going into those spaces when those discussions are taking place. That is the way we can leverage this discussion for, higher consideration by the duty bearers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. We're still taking and inviting more questions, comments, and reflections in the chat. Mr. Goka,
yes,
you alluded to a practice that I want to question you about. The fact that when we think about gender, we usually focus on the binary notions of gender. We don't look at how gender intersects with disability, age, ethnicity, class, etc. And I'm wondering, why is that still a problem in Ghana and among institutions that are spearheading the country's adaptation efforts? After so many years, we submitted NDCs for the Paris Agreement. Why is it still a challenge that we can't have these considerations that reflect and include all marginalized groups?
I think it's a practice that started slowly. People just, I don't know whether they misrepresent issues of gender just to mean women. So you find women interest groups who are basically always saying we are doing gender, and it's becoming the norm. So the other identifier vulnerable groups, like the people with disability, the aged, children, and the youth, are relegated to the background. I know organizations that have tagged themselves as gender organizations, but when you go into their work, they are only basically forming women group, but the name on them is. So the understanding of gender has been construed. Instead of them to take on the proper name, which is Women Interest Organization, they've put on the tag gender. So the people with disability don't really feel part of this sect that we call gender, because when we are doing our analysis and consideration of things, we don't include them. As I said, I'm very close and partners with the Ghana Federation of Disability. And when you make issues of gender, they say, hey, as for those gender groups, don't mind them. They don't consider us. All they know is women. You see, so it's something that theoretically is on the books. We have the clear definition for gender, but practically we've shifted away and did this segregation where gender is now women and the other vulnerable groups are not considered as gender in practice. So it's, a practice that came slowly and now it's festered across all sectors of the economy. Now gender is women, but how do we change the narrative to include the other vulnerable groups as part of gender? And when we are talking about making allocations for gender, they are also part of the subsets.
Your response is heavy on individual organizations and institutions, but the focus shouldn't it be on state institutions as well? Is it that they lack the capacity to understand the gender considerations that should go into climate change adaptation decisions?
Have you taken time to study the name of the ministry in charge of all these things? Ministry of Gender, Women, Gender, Social Protection, Children, and something. You see how loose that name is. So from the ministry's own perspective, we need to be asking them what is the meaning of gender from their perspective if children are not part of the gender. You see, and in terms of climate change, I'll say the Ministry of Gender is now putting in a lot of effort to make climate change and adaptation a more prioritized subject matter under their ministry. Previously, it was not so. It was purely the women and social protection things. But with constant engagement and deliberation, now more officers from the ministry have been attached to the climate change center, where the climate change policy documents and programs and actions are being developed. So in this current NDC framework, we are pushing very hard the Ministry of Gender to do a lot of input and be more specific in terms of their climate change adaptation and mitigation actions when it comes to issues of the various subsectors under the gender category, not only women. Also, it's about prioritization. From the national level, issues of gender and climate change adaptation has not been so topical and widespread. But now the understanding and the capacity as a ministry to meet up to that challenge is growing.
Very well. So there's a question in the chat. I'd refer to that, but I think that there's something fundamental that I should have asked earlier, and it may be in your presentation slides in terms of the architecture, climate financing architecture. What is it like? You talked about the budget and analysis you did in there. There obviously are international sources of funds and allocations for climate change. So as a country, a developing country like Ghana, what sources of funds do we usually look at when we're talking about climate finance, either for mitigation or adaptation?
Okay, so the sources of funds. So Ghana receives climate finance from the international community. Largely, most of our climate interventions are financed by outsiders. As a country on our own, our contribution to our own climate change interventions is very minimal. When you take our NDC framework and you see the amount of money that is being mentioned and where we are supposed to be getting this money from, it's as if the government of Ghana itself is not making any inputs when it comes to climate budget. So from the international community, when they are financing our climate change work, the international community is more focused on mitigation actions. Our climate finance is heavily on mitigation actions. That is avoiding carbon and all that. The percentage allocated for adaptation is quite small. So in-house or in country, we need to be very flexible, very dynamic in how we implement some of these heavily mitigation budgets in country, so that once we are doing mitigation, we will be having what is called adaptation co-benefits. So we have money from the international community that is purely a mitigation funded project. But in the course of doing that implementation, we are getting what is called adaptation co-benefit. It all depends on how we decide to implement those projects. And by that, our issues of gender should be heavily, adaptation related, can also be addressed. So as a country, we need to stop. One of the key things that is killing us in this country is isolated efforts. Even within government ministries and agencies, everybody is sources for funds independently. We are not doing a lot of synergies where we can combine efforts, make effective use of resources to address issues of adaptation. So you realize Ministry of Lands is sourcing its own funds to do its own mitigation action, Ministry of Environment is also writing its proposals with UNDP to collect their own money to go and do something somewhere. Ministry of Finance is also, chasing the Korean somewhere to collect money for some institutional capacity building and all that. So where is the convergence point? When can we say that about 2, 3, 4 ministries have come together and this is a national project and the interest is Ghana? Instead of, oh, Ministry of this is the one leading this, that kind of mentality, we need to grow over it and make sure we have national level projects that are receiving sufficient resources that can take care of our adaptation needs as a country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duka. So let me go to the question in the chat. This is from Jeffrey Asari. Says,
Okay.
what is the single biggest barrier preventing climate finance from reaching women-led or community-led adaptation initiatives?
I believe the questioner knows this answer already, and he wants to confirm it from me. You know, when you take our national level climate finances that are flowing into the country and do an analysis of how much comes into the country and how much eventually gets to the vulnerable people, the communities that are at the forefront of climate change and fighting for resilience, the erosion is around 70 to 30. So if I say 70 to 30, it means that about 70% of those funds ends up in workshops and hotels in Accra. Only 30% or less end up in the district where these works are supposed to be done. And you know the bureaucracies involved in our district level practices. So before the money gets to the community where the real action is to take place, less than 20%, 10% is allocated for actual work in the communities. I don't know whether people on this platform knows the Volta region very well, the Keta coastal areas very well, where sea erosion and coastal erosion are taking place in Keta. You see how the whole communities are washed away. What is the plan? What is NADMO doing to alleviate the plight of the people in Keta? As we speak, do the people of Keta know where the next storm or the next erosion is coming to take place? And when it happens, where are they going? You know, that community, they are located in between the land and the lagoon. So the land space is very small. So this is where we need practical adaptation measures. What are we doing as a country? What is our priority? Meanwhile, when you go to the database, you go to Ministry of Finance, and the number of organizations, both government organizations and non-government organizations, the amount of monies that have come into the system to support the people of Keta and the Southern Volta region to build resilience and climate change, you marvel. The situation hasn't changed. It's still like that. We are still fishing in area communities where a whole cemetery. I was in one of the communities where the cemetery is just by the shore. The sea goes and hit against the tombstones or whatever they call it, the graves. And you see freshly buried bodies less than 3 months. Their graves are caving in and the sea flows into those graves and comes out. And people are fishing 100 to 200 kilometers away from those graves. Do you know where all those fishes land? They smoke it and bring it to Accra. What are we eating? So the issues of climate change and adaptation, building and all that, it's no more just a physical discussion. We need to do real work on the conscience of people, cultural sites that are importance to communities. How do we use all our national level effort and strategies to make sure people are well relocated to safer grounds? Because between the sea and the lagoon, where will you go? It's only the main road that is separating these two waters. So when the next storm comes, where are the people going? Meanwhile, people are sleeping in those dilapidated buildings. So it's about issues of priority and making sure that we see this as a national level catastrophe that is awaiting. Thank you.
Thank you too, Mr. Goka, for that response. Another question in here and in fact, if any of you has any comment or reflections on any of the questions that have come and the responses, please feel free to send it in the chat or gesture and mute your mic, and then you can speak. This is a question from AJ. It says, to ensure effective accountability, we need sex disaggregated data. What key performance indicators is the government currently using to track the gender impact of climate expenditures? And how is this data being made publicly available to CSOs to monitor compliance and effectiveness? So I think the essence of this question is government even committed to gender indicators at all in this whole effort to build a resilient Ghana? And are these indicators available so CSOs can track for accountability purposes?
All right, so let me say that government is doing what they can in a bid to deal with issues of gender and issues of adaptation through the national adaptation plan process and all that. And these processes are always underfunded. UNDP most of the times is the ones that supports government to develop some of these frameworks, but the Environmental Protection Authority and MESTI, that Ministry of Environment, always complain about inadequate finances to complete some of the processes. So through the MESTI and EPA, government is doing a semblance of what should be classified as making sure that gender and the categorization and disaggregated data and all that is being worked on, but it's always work in progress. It's never completed. Number two, as for the climate finance and the sectors it's going to and the gender disaggregated whatever, Ministry of Finance, I remember about 2-3 years ago, they tried to develop a framework. They call it a dashboard, climate finance dashboard, that could capture inflows that are coming into the country by way of climate finance. We had that discussion. I was on the committee that did all the dirty work to make sure that there is some template in place. But of course, that committee at the Ministry of Finance then, about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, was also heavily supported by the UNDP. And that dashboard never got completed because the project ended. So as we speak, if you go to Ministry of Finance and you want some of these gender disaggregated data and related to climate finance and adaptation and all that, you won't get a complete or a holistic picture. You will get what is pertaining to the government agencies. So all the ministries that are receiving climate finance and what they are supposed to use it for, all that, at least there are some records of that you may get from the Ministry of Finance. But the big question is, what about those that are not directly under government, who are also receiving support for some of these projects? Who are they reporting to and all that? The attempt by the Ministry of Finance to bring we non-state actors together so that we can come together and put together some of these data, we are yet to start. We've never begun in anything because they always say that there is no money to bring non-state actors together to begin this conversation. So that is where we are. So you have data sort of from the Ministry of Finance, but only from the ministries and agencies that are willing to submit those information to Ministry of Finance. But for we, the non-state sector actors, there is nothing on record that you can track. Thank you.
I think I saw a gesture from Rose Pepper, while you were responding to that question. Rose, if you're still here, you can unmute your mic and speak. Let's hear your questions. Rose, Pepe, if you're still here, I think there was an indication from your end that you wanted to ask a question. So if you're still in there, and I think she's still in there, Rose, I can see you, you're still in there. So unmute your microphone and ask your question. While we wait for Rose to do that, let's check the chats button. See, I think there are other questions in there. This one is from Mandela. It says, how can MMDA strategically position themselves to attract financing directly from the donor community to address climate adaptation projects? Mr. Gupa.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, you can go ahead. Is this something that's feasible?
All right, so about 2023, so CASA partnered with the Ministry of Finance because we realized that most of our district planning officers, district budget officers, capacity and knowledge on climate finance was a bit low. So we started a regional tour to build the capacities of our district planning officers and our district budget officers so that we can, expatiate on what climate finance is and the opportunities that are available to attract their own funding as a district for their own climate change works. So we did that in about 3 regions of Ghana. But as you know, we are limited in terms of resources, how far we can go. It was the Ministry of Environment in Germany that supported us on funds to be able to do this road show. So ministries, agencies, the district assemblies, if you have the capacity to do your own proposal for your own communities in your area, it is allowed. But the question is about the capacity to develop bankable projects that donors can accept and give you funding directly. Examples of that exist in the Keta municipality of the Volta region, where they have been supported by one CSO to do their own, climate change project proposal for Keta, and they were able to get funding to support them to do some exchange between Keta and Germany and some other cities so that they can do cross learning in order to build their capacity on how to live within the kind of environment they find themselves. That is the very volatile, fragile area of Keta where people are located between CC and the lagoon. What are the adaptation mechanisms, adaptation measures that they can learn from Germany and Holland in order to build resilience in their district? So it exists. If they are willing to learn and have the right partnership, they can do their own proposals.
Okay, this presupposes, and this is just a follow-up comment, it presupposes that for organizations like CASA, GenSed, SIGRA, we could actually venture into these capacity building to ensure that districts can put together their own bankable proposals to secure funding.
Nothing stops us.
Okay, great. Rose is here. I see her hand. So Rose, kindly unmute and ask your question.
Okay, hello. Yeah, hello.
Yes, Hi. We can hear you, Rose.
Yeah, good morning. Okay, so my question is about the fund allocation. Okay, so Mr. Jonathan was saying about 70% is being allocated to hotels and then some other stuff, and then 20% of that fund is rather located for the work. And I want to ask, how are we going to achieve an effective work done if 20% is the amount that is being allocated for the actual work? Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rose. Mr. Goka, so this is a practical question. She's dumbfounded. Yeah. And so help us.
That is a very interesting question, but all depends on how whoever is attracting this resource is able to make sure that majority of the resource gets to the affected communities. I can give you an example. Still in the Volta region, there is a project called the WACA project, West African Coastal Resilience Improvement Project. It's a $150 million project, and about 98% of that money is a loan. It's not a grant. It is between the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Lands. And they are supposed to support the people of the Volta region or coastal areas of Keta, Adan, and Aflau on how their coastal resilience can be improved, adaptation measures improved, and all that. But if I go into the nitty-gritty of how that money is being allocated, and already the amount that we are spending out of that money in hotels in Accra, Kempinski Hotel, just to launch the project, another Movenpick Hotel, just to discuss one aspect of the objective. You know, so by the time we hit the ground running, so the 70%, as I mentioned, it is not something that somebody put on paper that this is what should be spent in Accra. No. But in the process of implementing the project or delivering upon the activities, that is how come a lot of workshop meetings are held back to back, and about 80% of those meetings are held in Accra. So by the time resources that are supposed to go into the communities to do actual work, then we are also talking about consultants. You know how we use consultants in this country. The consultant is doing a baseline study, is doing feasibility. It's the same money out of this money that is going to consultants. So when will the communities get the money to start planting the mangroves? And duplication of efforts. Ministry of Lands has their own consultant doing their studies. Ministry of Environment have their own consultant doing their studies, and Hydro Department doing their own consultancies, and all that. The money is shared into bits and pieces with all these people and their consultants. So when you do analysis of those monies, you realize that at the end of the day, before the project is over, only 1 acre of mangrove is planted in one community, and that ends it. And we develop tons of reports that doesn't translate into resilience building. So those are the things I'm talking about. So depending on who is holding the money and the project implementation modalities, if majority of the activities are not centered in the project locations, then forget it. This 70% can be more in Accra. Thank you.
Okay. It's interesting because even with the example you've mentioned, you said it's a loan, which means that we have to pay. I mean, considering that as a country, our debt burden is already high, and we're taking loans for climate change related projects that are not necessarily being used for the actual implementation of the project. That is
just Google the name, West African Coastal Resilience Improvement Projects. WASIM project, and you see the details there.
So we're spending money that we'll pay later, but we're not spending to the projects that they're intended for. Anyway, since we're speaking within the framework of the National Adaptation Plan, I want to take this question that's in the chat from Nabole. It says, what practical reforms could be integrated into NAP implementation to ensure resources flow more equitably to vulnerable groups? You remember that we're set to launch the NAP. The understanding I had was that it could happen any time from now. This is a key question, Mr. Guka, if you can attempt it.
You know, some of these interventions, these nice names that we have, you know, it's mostly it's not resonating with the generality of the ordinary people on the streets. So it is intellectual, it is like an intellectual exercise where people, national adaptation plan and process and whatever. The question is, how are we domesticating, or making sure some of these NAP processes are resonating with our community development plan? At the beginning of my submission, I mentioned that the smallest unit of development is our community development plan. How are our community development plans informing the district assembly plans that are being submitted at the national level? That is where we can get money for all this. So as for the NAP process, I've been part of that process for a long time, but it's always meetings, and discussions, consultants, as to when it will feed into the community, the district level planning process is I don't know when it will happen. You see, so we've configured all these things. Meanwhile, the reality of people facing the impact of climate change are real. So all those theoretical things we are doing in the under the NAP process, just developing documents and frameworks, and they are not resonating with the ordinary person on the street who is facing coastal erosion, or who in the north is facing real drought, where rains are not coming, or when the rains come and scatter their farms, and those people are getting more vulnerable. When will these NAPs find expression at the local level, well translated into the local language, to inform a local person's practical action so that the person can overcome its vulnerability? You see, enough of the English and the cliches that we have touched all this, and people are wearing coat and tie, collecting monies all the time because they are consultant. They will come and ask you questions and go and write it in the report. You see, we are not serious with the issues of fighting climate change and building resilience. I think civil society organizations like ourselves should be more practical and be asking these ministries and agencies who are developing this national level document, asking them questions. How does that inform the farming practices of a local farmer in Nyakpanduri whose farm is under flood? How does it inform a local farmer who is located in Keta, who is into tomato farming, where coastal erosion has taken away the person's farm? So what is the NAP about that person's life? How is it affecting the person's livelihood? Would we continue speaking English in Accra till when? So me, I'm not moved by some of these launching a project, this thing, launching NAP, launching this. For me, it's of no effect. It is just for an academic exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nabole, actually, I don't know if people are operating telepathically, but she sent a question just like seconds ago. How can CSOs track climate finance transparency at a district level? And I think that is what you have addressed in your last comments to that question. But because you were speaking about NAP and then the lowest unit of governance, and you talked about district assemblies, I just remembered that last week when we were having this conversation about partnerships for building a climate resilient Ghana, we understood, or we were informed, that the EPA is currently helping some 15 districts to develop their district adaptation plans that will then go into feed into the medium-term development plans of the district assemblies. But the catch is, it's just 15 districts that are benefiting from this out of 261 districts in the country. And that is a big problem to me. And I know you share in that concern as well.
I've started hearing about this selected district assembly being part of the NAP process, not today. It's over 2 years now, madam. Long time ago, and we are still mentioning 15. Is that the only way to make our district assembly plans more climate responsive? Is that the only way? That's the question. No. We can do more. There are other processes that are ongoing to support the National Development Planning Commission. It's always developing the medium-term development, whatever, guiding framework and all that. All these things can be integrated. Instead of developing a lot of isolated frameworks, and I mean, asking the same district assembly, asking the same district planning officer to be, I mean, falling head over heels over all these frameworks just to come out. Already, I told you, the minutest level of putting together development plan is at the community level. And we have what is called community development plan. So the NAP should go beyond just the assembly and go to the community. We have community with specific needs. You see, every community and their peculiar needs. So if you are running the NAPs, let's ask from these communities how they are fitting into the NAP process. Ending it at the assembly level will not make any difference. As you rightly mentioned, we have 270 something district assembly, and if you take 15 of them out, what are the rest doing? All because we say there is no money to cover the rest. So lack of priority, another statement that I made earlier on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luka. And it's just about 10 minutes to 11:30. We'll be wrapping up shortly.
Okay.
Just to inform participants in the meeting that we have put in the chat the post-webinar survey link. And so you could take a few minutes to respond to that even as we explore more questions and reflections in the chat. So kindly just go to the chat and click on the link and then help us improve our future programming. Okay, so Mr. Gokak, this question, is from Mandela again. Says, how can communities hold local NGOs receiving climate finance on their behalf to account?
Please read the question again.
Mandela wants to know how communities can hold local NGOs, by extension CSOs, and groupings who are receiving climate finance on their behalf to account.
Mandela, now you want to attack us. You have left government and you want to attack we, the poor CSOs, also receiving small money, eh? Anyway, so local communities, number one, if a project proponent or a civil society or NGO uses your community's name to go and take some climate change money, number one, once the person comes to start implementing the project, the person needs to declare all the objectives of this project, declare all the activities and who are going to be the implementers of these activities, and the related costs from the beginning. You need to be aware as a local community stakeholder. But if you sit down and you are not knowledgeable on what the project document states, you'll be there. Instead of us to come and plant maybe 2 hectares of mangroves and we tell the donor that it's going to cost up $20,000, and we come and you don't ask us this question, and you are only interested in the Coke and pie that we share on the day of the launch of the project, and you are clapping for us, we will go home with this information. And we will come back and do 1 hectare and spend $5,000 on it, and go and write a report and say that we have done the 2 hectares and we spend all the 20,000. So from the word go, communities should be made aware on what the project details are, especially the activities that are going to be done in their communities and how much those activities are going to cost, and get to know who are the implementers of those activities so that we ensure that majority of the money stays in the community. Rather than people driving V8s from Accra in the morning to come to you in the morning and come and give you a few seedlings and ask you to plant, and we give you pie and Coca-Cola and give you a few coins to buy water and we leave you. then we are also as guilty as the government agencies as the same things they are doing. So information on the project before you even allow implementers to start, and asking to know the cost of the project and what is coming to the community, then the project implementers will know that you are serious and you are knowledgeable on what is to be done here, because they've used the name of your community to go and collect money. So you should be concerned. So it's about information sharing. On the day of the project launch or whatever stakeholder engagement, you ask some of these critical questions and monitor the implementation of some of these activities with timelines. You don't just allow them to tell you that, oh, we will come and plant mangrove here, we will come and build a gutter here, we will come and do a storm drain here without timelines. No. Okay. So those are some of the avenues you can hold these NGOs to account. Yeah.
Very well. You seem to be saying that it's a shared responsibility, really, accountability.
Exactly. Yeah.
And everybody should play their respective roles. I have just two questions before we wrap up, Mr. Doka. So one, I think it's the first question is about the importance of gender responsive climate budgeting as a question, because I do know that, and when you read the literature, they say that gender equality is smart economics. And if you juxtapose, means that if you're putting gender considerations to climate actions, you are invariably leading to smart climate actions. How important is gender responsive budgeting to the cause of equity in climate adaptation and mitigation efforts?
You already answered yourself, and I don't know which other word to use apart from importance. Very important and very smart way of, responding to issues of climate change. On the vulnerability ladder, people are vulnerable to climate change with different strengths and weaknesses. So if you address the poor of the poor or the poor of the vulnerable, then we are making an impact. So climate responsive and gender responsive budgeting is important. In that case, you are addressing the issues of the most vulnerable populations within a community from the word go, or giving them the capacity to be able to overcome their circumstances. So we can't overemphasize why gender responsive budgeting is important, because it's a cross-cutting issue and it solves so many problems along that gender space. So as we are doing that gender responsive budgeting and making sure that the poor of the poor, the most vulnerable people within a community are receiving support, then I think we are making a headway as a nation. It is when we don't know the value of gender within our development space, then we relegate gender to the background. But it's the most important thing we have to do when we are responsible as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question. It's a double barrel question, and I hope you would indulge me in that regard.
I'll try.
Okay, so what would a truly gender responsive climate finance framework look like in practice? And in answering that, if you could chip in 2 recommendations to ensure that our current NAP leads to equitable financing of adaptation projects, we'll be very happy.
Equitable financing for projects in terms of adaptation. As I said, most of our climate change interventions are not even being financed locally. We are always towing the lines of the Western and the Eastern Europe, and where our source of finance is coming from. So it is difficult to chart our own path as a country when we say what we need is adaptation, not mitigation. We all know that in Ghana, because of this gender and the way our vulnerability looks like, the best way for us in this circumstance is to tackle issues of adaptation, because the worst aspect of climate change are happening in certain communities. It is not reasonable for us to be prioritizing mitigation. But sadly enough, we are not the masters of our own game by financing our own local initiatives to address our local concerns. So everything we do, from the nationally determined contribution framework to the national adaptation planning and all that, are all, financed by international donors. So we have to toe the lines of those international donors if they are interested in mitigation. That is what we do, to the detriment of our adaptation needs, and to that matter, to the detriment of our gender groups. So as I said, so even in the quest to respond to our donors in terms of mitigation, let's be strategic enough to add adaptation co-benefits, whether to the NAPS or to the what, because the NAPS will be there. Without resources, we can't implement it. And if you don't have the resources that are coming are for mitigation purposes. So why don't we be flexible enough to structure our mitigation activities such that they have adaptation components integrated into it, so that we can achieve both of adaptation and mitigation at the same time. So that is my take. It's about our own ingenuity in the approach to the delivery of our mitigation actions to respond to our adaptation needs. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Coker, just a follow up because I have not gotten the link. So we're speaking about the National Adaptation Plan, which is, from the name you can see it's clearly for adaptation purposes, not mitigation.
Yeah.
Which practical ways can we ensure that this framework or this plan is implemented in a way where there is equity?
Have you been assured that we have enough resources to implement our adaptation plans?
Okay. That
is the question number one.
Okay.
Have we said that we've gotten resources? Then that is a good start. Because these adaptation plans have been on the drawing board for only God knows how long. And the only limitation or challenge has always been financing. Have we been able to secure finances to implement our national adaptation plan as a nation? Rather than that, the practicals we are talking about, civil society organizations are writing their own proposals and getting their own money to implement their own projects. So how does the national levels stakeholder, which is the EPA, partner with these NGOs and CSOs who are doing bits and bits of their work in the communities? How do we factor issues within the National Adaptation Plan into our own planning processes, so that when we get funding, then in one way or the other, we are implementing our National Adaptation Plan without even knowing it? Okay. How is the National Adaptation Plan publicized among the non-state actors communities, so that the National Adaptation Plan is not only sitting in EPA, where you need information, you have to drive there to go and get that information, but they are bringing us the information as if they need that most. This attitude of sitting in your office as a national whatever, and you are saying that CS, when you need the information, you come. That kind of approach will never work. So dissemination of the National Adaptation Plan to every civil society actor who is actively participating in this space, to find expression through their project and to their community. That is why we can achieve equity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goka. That will be the final question. Just as we wrap up, it's just a comment, some goodwill message sort of from Malawi, from Richard Maloya, Director at the Initiative for Climate Action and Development, saying that this is a good discussion. So, Mr. Goka, you have a fan in Richard Maloya there.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Goka, for being on this call and doing justice to the subject, the topic of discussion. We've enjoyed the practical insights you've brought and how you've related everything you said to our realities as a country. So thank you so much for talking to us and being part of this discussion. And to our participants, we are grateful. This conversation has reinforced that climate financing is not only a technical issue, it is a question of equity, justice, and development priorities. You heard from Mr. Goka there. Women, vulnerable groups are essential actors in building resilience, not beneficiaries to be added in later. In his words, they shouldn't be just a check box. There should be some intentionality about involving these groups. As we conclude this final webinar in this series, we hope that the discussions do not end here. We encourage you to extend this conversation into your workspaces, community networks, policy engagements, and in your advocacy efforts. Before you leave, please take a moment to complete the post-webinar survey that we have dropped in the chat. We've dropped the link in the chat, please, because your feedback is important in helping us strengthen future programming and also to assess our learning outcomes from this particular project. My name is Regina Bole-Bote. I've been moderating the series so far, and on behalf of GenSet, thank you once again for your time, your expertise, and your continued commitment to ensuring that we build a climate resilient Ghana that leaves no one behind. We are very grateful. We wish you a wonderful rest of day, and in fact, weekend. Today is Friday, so have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation.